I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and good morning, Bowling Green, and hello to everyone on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I am here with my wonderful co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, together, Rebecca and I are about to craft an unforgettable hour of radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. And we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your family and your coworkers and the trees and the birds and the worms and the little bacteria floating around in the atmosphere, because, like it or not, all of us are wrapped up together in this wonderful little ball called Earth. And we have a really good...
I kind of like it.
Yeah, it is kind of nice, isn't it?
Yes.
I prefer Earth to any of the other planets, frankly. I mean, it's my favorite. Yeah. So we have a great show lined up for you today. First, we're just going to chat for a little bit here. And I'm going to talk about, I just got back from an incredible trip out west, which had all kinds of eco experiences out there. Those of you who listened to the show last week know that I actually started out in Salt Lake City, and that, last week we had an interview with a gal who's head of Friends of the Great Salt Lake, but there were lots of other things that happened on that trip. So then we're going to hear from Kelly Wicks, and Kelly Wicks is the owner of a coffee shop in Bowling Green called Grounds for Thought. And the reason I interviewed him is because he has set up a special relationship with a family coffee farm down there in Columbia, which includes the creation of a reserve, a nature reserve on the coffee farm. And I thought that was really cool. So we'll talk to him in a little bit. Then we'll hear from our incredible advertisers and patrons. And I don't know how it's possible, but like every week, my gratitude towards our advertisers and patrons grows, because without them, we couldn't be bringing you this show. Then Rebecca. And Rebecca, what will you be sharing with us today?
Well, it sounds like a little bit of a bummer, but I'm going to be sharing one of my uncle's sermons about grieving for the earth, or the last page anyway.
Okay. And then it's eco news from around the world. It's sort of a roundup of some of the more important environmental stories that have been coming through at some point in the past couple weeks. And hopefully at some point we will also hear from you. And this is a call-in show. This is the reason we do it live, if whatever possible, because we love to hear from you folks. So give us a call at 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007. Or you can send an email, joe@joedemare4agreenfuture.org, or you can send a text at 419-973-5841. We can't read the texts on the air, but we will we'll respond to any text you send this week. We'll talk about it next week's show. So that's 419-877-5841. 5841. Okay, so out west, it was an amazing adventure. It was 10 days out there, and I flew into Salt Lake City. And so part of what I wanted to do here is I ended up, during this trip, I ended up both flying and driving and taking the train. And so just, I got some comparisons here in terms of carbon. So using a website called carbonfootprint.com, I calculated, or they calculated that my flight to New York City, or to Salt Lake City, actually from Detroit Airport to Salt Lake City generated 0.32 metric tons of CO2.
Wow.
So just that one flight, I'm going to have to plant like,
Okay, but you should split that between all the people on the plane.
No, that's each.
That's each? Holy guacamole.
Yeah, because, think about how many tons of fuel the jet has to burn to go all that ways. And so each of us was responsible for 0.32 metric tons of CO2.
And all to be crammed in like a little sardine.
Yeah.
Among severely cranky people.
Yes.
Were they angry?
They weren't horribly angry, but
that's good. Because it goes that way sometimes.
Yeah, but we were in there, like sardines, as you say, and I actually did accidentally bump a couple people, because what happened was the stewardess was serving stuff and she spilled water all over me and my coat at one point. And so I was wiping that off and my elbow was back in the aisle and I accidentally bumped somebody with my elbows. Yeah, it was not nearly as pleasant as the train ride, but part of the reason I took the train back, even though that took 2 days, was I knew about this carbon number and I felt I couldn't justify generating, 0.64 tons of CO2. And actually the return trip, interestingly enough, on the train only generated 0.01 metric tons. So went from, more than half a metric ton to about 1/100th of a metric ton. So just an illustration of how wonderfully energy efficient trains are. And if I'd had 14 days instead of 10 days, I would have taken the train both ways, but I didn't. So then anyway, got to Salt Lake City, and the purpose of the trip, one of the purposes of the trip was actually we were going to go skiing at some place called Park City. So what we needed to do was rent a car. And what the plan was, renting a car to go one way from Salt Lake City down to Vegas, and flying, my friend that I went with, she flew out of Vegas and I took the train from Vegas. So we went to the car rental place and they said, well, it's a one-way rental, so you've only got 2 cars to choose from. And one was a Mustang, a brand new Mustang, which is cool, but not very practical for lugging skis around in.
Right.
The other was a BMW i4 all-electric car.
Ooh.
Like my dream car.
Ooh.
If I was really into cars and had an unlimited amount of money, that would be on the list. And so I was super psyched about it. And amazing car, super comfortable, all the bells and whistles. It had a heads-up display on the windshield showing you your speed and the speed limit all the time, so you knew exactly how much you were speeding. Ooh. So you had no excuse if somebody pulls you over. But super comfortable. It anticipated our every need and want. It was kind of like having a servant and a car. But unfortunately, my friend that I was with wasn't quite comfortable driving an electric car all the way across the mountains and the deserts from Park City down to first we went to Bryce Canyon National Park and then to Zion National Park. Mm-hmm. And so it turns out the range is about 300 miles electric, but that's in normal weather. And so what we calculated, because we used that car for the first couple days, because Salt Lake to Park City is no problem. Unfortunately, we weren't able to find high-level chargers. We could only find level 2 chargers. And so what we discovered was that the range reduced from about 300 to about 200 miles. And the longest leg of the trip we had to take was 201 miles. So she wasn't comfortable. So we ended up swapping out our BMW i4 for a Kona,
Okay.
a Hyundai Kona. So we went from like an $80,000 car to a $20,000 car. And, you know, I was heartbroken, but I could understand, you know, her concern. And so we went ahead and did that. But it was still wonderful to drive that BMW for those couple of days. And like I said, if I had an unlimited amount of money, that would definitely be on the list. So we went to Park City skiing, and that was really cool. And I loved it. You know, I cross country ski, but so for this was the second time in my life I ever downhill skied. And I discovered that I'm really good at making turns. Like I can come down the slope and do these nice swooping turns as much as I want, but I'm really bad at stopping.
Yeah, that is the problem with skiing. The going forward really fast is actually easy.
Yeah, and so I have a heart monitor on my watch because you know, I have this heart condition. So I ran my ECG and I looked at my heart record, and that entire day my heart's like up in the red. So
wow,
I was like,
Danger
okay.
Will Robinson.
Yeah, I got my workout, but it was still beautiful. But one of the things I realized out there on this mountain covered in snow, there was no snow in Salt Lake City. Completely dry. It was like 50 degrees when we were there. It was cold and snowy up on top of this mountain, but I realized that winter has kind of been monetized. Do you know what I mean? If you can't afford to go to a mountain, you don't really get that deep winter snow anymore. You might get snow every now and then, but the snow up there on this mountain was like 4 feet deep, and it felt like winter again. You know, I'd almost forgotten that feeling you get when you're surrounded by snow drifts and it's really cold and you need to have a couple layers. We haven't had that around here in quite a while, but I enjoyed it immensely. I mean, I see why people do it. Just the joy of it was really cool. But you know, it just made me sad. It made me miss winter because, as you know, we're in a deep global warming, which we'll talk a little more in this news segment. So then I also, while I was there, I looked at the local newspaper, the Park Record, to see what kind of environmental conflicts they're having down there in Park City. And one is they're opening another huge resort, which is going to open in 2025, called Deer Valley East. And, you know, Park City, it turns out, is the most popular ski destination in the United States. And because there's this because the Park City resort is just this unbelievably huge thing that covers like 3 different mountains. But they're making it even bigger. And another story is that the local people who are concerned about wildlife want to create a wildlife bridge because it turns out that all kinds of animals are getting hit by cars down there, elk and antelope, and it's a big problem. There's all these signs saying watch for animals, but apparently they're not working because
you have to actually go slow sometimes and look for the animals and then stop. You can't just watch them.
Yeah, true, right. Watching them doesn't actually stop you from running them over. So that was kind of interesting. But then the next leg of our trip, what we did was we drove from Park City in our I shouldn't say gas guzzling. It was actually very fuel efficient for an internal combustion engine. In our high mileage Hyundai Kona, we drove from Park City down to Bryce Canyon National Park. And along the way, we saw a lot of dramatic scenery, mountains and valleys. And I did see a herd of antelope. That was kind of the highlight of the trip for me. That's only the second time in my life I've seen wild antelope.
This is the thing, having been to Wyoming, antelope don't really play that much. Usually when you see them, they're being giant couch potatoes.
Well, I think they were doing the spring mating thing because they were really.
They were lively. Okay.
Yeah, they were moving around.
I just kept seeing antelopes that were just. One of them kind of was lying in the middle of the road, and it kind of was like, oh, okay, I'll move. Kind of trotted off just in the nick of time.
Well, this is spring down there, and I guess when antelope turn to thoughts of love, they start jumping around. So.
But this is this is actually a feature animals whose primary survival skill is speed actually just kind of spend a lot of time lying around conserving their energy.
Yeah, getting ready.
it's a thing.
Yeah. So anyway, we eventually got to Bryce Canyon National Park, and I have to say, this may be one of the most beautiful places on the planet, just objectively speaking, just looking at these beautiful formations. They have all these stone formations called hoodoos, which is a corruption of the Ute word which is odus. But there's the story, the myth is that these are people that were a very greedy, selfish people, self-centered people, and so Coyote turned them all to stone. They're all standing around there because they've been turned to stone. But they're all different colors, they're all different shapes and sizes, and there's really cool ones where you'll have a huge boulder perched on top of this tiny little pillar that looks impossible. And it's just literally one of the most beautiful places in the world. And those of you who watch our YouTube video, I'm going to upload some of the just amazing photos I took while we were there. And it's a beautiful place. There's eagles, there's ravens. I saw a lot of ravens there. And just a wonderful time hiking around in Bryce National Park. And from there, we went to Zion. And interestingly enough, we got to the park in the middle of the night when there was a full moon out. So our first view of the mountains in Zion National Park was in moonlight. Ooh. And that was, I couldn't capture that with my camera, but it was just unbelievably beautiful. And I could not believe just how vertical these cliffs are. The tops of these mountains are 4,000 feet above the valley floor that you're on, and it's just like 90-degree angles. It's just incredible. But that's also an incredibly beautiful place with mountains of like deep red parts of the mountains and whites, and as the light shifts all day long, they change color. Just incredible. And we hiked around in there. At the longest point, we did a 5-hour hike up and down these mountains, which my knee later had a talk with me about. But it was magical because as we were hiking along,
you get older, more and more of your body develops opinions.
That's for sure. Yeah. But as we were hiking along, these mule deer and these turkeys just came out and hiked along with us for a while.
All right.
Yeah, we were just, going along, and the mule deer would come out and they'd be like, yeah, you look okay. They were just grazing alongside us as we were walking. Literally, we were like 2 or 3 feet from them. We weren't trying to get close to them. They got close to us. So.
I've watched too many morbid YouTube videos, so I think they were skinwalkers.
Well,
I guess they just wanted to, hang out though. So
we didn't provoke them.
Okay, that's good.
No, we were just like, hi, nice day.
There we go.
Yeah, just kept walking. But that was also an incredible experience. And so then from there, of course, as I said, we went to Vegas, baby.
Wow,
which was
that must have been different.
A huge culture shock. We were walking, just from literally wilderness to literally the most human-dominated environment in the world.
Yeah.
We were on this one part that was there's a strip. There's a street down the center of the Vegas downtown part with casinos on either side that has this kilometer-long roof over it, which is like a half cylinder that's covered in LEDs and is just constant computer-generated images like waves splashing and geometric shapes spinning around with music that's so loud that our hotel room, 2 blocks away was vibrating all night long.
Wild.
With slot machines everywhere and showgirls and you know, people flying overhead on zip lines. It was we tried to walk it, but it like halfway down, my friend was just like, I can't take this anymore. And we had to go back to the hotel room, but it really brought home like the difference between what we humans create, the landscapes we create versus the landscapes that just nature will create if you let them. Because the whole thing is the whole world could be just as beautiful as Zion or Bryce if we didn't turn it into things like you know, the Las Vegas Strip. So just a really beautiful, eye-opening trip, and it was just great. The train ride home was also very nice. I got into really good conversations. You always do on the train. But one thing that I'd never ridden this segment of the train before, we went from the southwest. So we saw like going through New Mexico. I saw cliffs and mesas and more antelope. And when we crossed the Mississippi River, I saw a bunch of eagles on the shore, on the edge of the, you know, roosting of the trees next to the Mississippi River, and that was beautiful. So I'm almost recovered from this trip, but I wanted to share it all with you because, you know, when you take trips like this, it does give you a snapshot into what's going on the continent and in the world, and so I just always go with sort of an environmental eye on everything. So that was it. That was my big trip. Happy to share it with you. And now we're going to go to our interview, and this is with Kelly Wicks, and he takes trips every year down to Costa Rica because his coffee shop has a special relationship with his family coffee farm down there. So let's hear the interview with Kelly Wicks. All right, so welcome to For a Green Future. Could you just tell us your name and who you're with?
Sure. My name is Kelly Wicks, and I am, along with my wife, the owner of Grounds for Thought here in Bowling Green.
All right. There's the Grounds for Thought. People might guess from the title is a coffee shop.
Indeed.
Yes. And you actually source your coffee directly, correct?
You know, what we do is, whenever possible, we try to indeed develop what I like to refer to as family-to-family direct trade. So not only from an individual farm, but from a small family farm that in some ways is a small business, much like the way we are here in Bowling Green. Now, I can't say that we do that with all our coffee. It's just not, for a company our size, not currently possible, but what we continue to do and what is my main goal when it comes to the import business is to indeed continue to expand those relationships. So additional farms in Nicaragua, we're building relationships now in the early stages in El Salvador and in Guatemala. And so, you know, over a course of time, we hope to continue to expand that repertoire of that family-to-family direct trade.
Yeah, that's great. And you've always, I've known you for some time, you've always been very concerned about the environment, which is why I asked you on For a Green Future today.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And what caught my eye, the reason I finally decided to interview you is that you've created a reserve
in Colombia.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so so the farm in Colombia, the El Carmelo farm, it's in the Andes, southern Andes, in the Huila region outside of a little town called Teruel, Colombia. And it's a beautiful little town of a few thousand people. And then you're up, I don't know, 5 or 6 miles up into the hills where the El Carmelo farm sits. And we've been developing this relationship with them, strengthening and deepening the relationship for about 4 years now. And we try to go a couple times a year if we can. You know, our next trip will be here actually in April to come back and visit the farm and the reserve. But on a trip to the farm in October of 2022, we began talking to Miguel and his wife Catalina and their family about how the 25% of the farm that has been in native virgin forests since the farm began over 100 years ago, continues to be able to be that way, because what has happened over the last 10 or 15 years is that historically low prices for green coffee have forced farmers in all countries to try to maximize profits by cutting down as much of the forest on their land as they can, so that they can stand a chance at not losing money. And so we began the conversation, like I said, in October of 2022, how we partner just beyond buying green coffee for them. How do we work together to ensure that this land stays as it is for future generations? And over the course of between October and March of last year, we hammered out the details basically. And we announced in March of last year, indeed, the creation of the Grounds for Thought Nature Reserve at the El Carmelo Farm. And it's a commitment between Grounds for Thought and Miguel and Catalina, the owners of the El Carmelo Farm and Apu Cafe, their brand in Colombia, to make sure that we basically let the property be, you know? And so that, because while it itself is really, 5-10 acres. It's really, in the whole scope of things, very small. But what it does is that it, along with other private nature reserves, create these incredibly important migratory pathways to these larger. Colombia has done a pretty nice job of creating over 24 large national reserves, all right? And one of them is in the Huila region, not too far from the farm and the reserve itself. And so these commitments by small business farmers and ourselves to continue to establish these pathways helps to make sure that animals can, particularly during the mating season or migratory season, move from these reserves from one area to another easily, because most of these animals in the region, they face threats from development and deforestation. And so this is our commitment to try to help mitigate some of those circumstances.
Right, because creating genetic islands, where populations can't mix is actually long term. It's not viable for critters. They've got to be able to get around.
I think these are all things that countries are learning too, and so it's important too, I think, for farms, like Miguel and El Carmelo and other farms in the Huila region, the Teruel region, to say, hey, this is important. And so we're not the only ones. Other farmers are doing, not all farmers, but farmers are doing their part to try to, grow coffee in a sustainable fashion. Not use pesticides and fertilizers. Try to maintain those buffers if they are there. Now, some of these farms had forests that were cut down 100 years ago. And so then it's not just a reserve, it's a reforestation effort. All right, and those are much more complex and long-term projects, but they are happening. And then also the commitment to clean water, because water, coffee growing and processing can be water intensive. And so one of the things like the El Carmelo farm and many farms in the area, they have a commitment to safe water practices. So the water that they draw from the stream or the spring that runs through the property and the reserve, by the time it gets back into the downstream, it's as clean as it went in. All right, through a series of soakaways and a modern two-step filter and leach system, and so they're doing their part to make sure that the people down the valley aren't subject to what they could be putting into that water. Yeah, correct.
I want to just step back for a second to something you mentioned. I think this is getting off the ecological and onto the economic for a minute.
Sure.
But
they're related.
But they are connected.
Yes.
I think a lot of people would be surprised, people who buy coffee, to hear that the green coffee prices are really low.
Well, they are, because what happens is that Brazil and Vietnam, who grow and export the largest amount of coffee in the world, drive the base commodity price for coffee. Right? And then all coffee trades at a price, better coffee, above that commodity price. All right. So when the commodity price is very low, then the differentials for specialty coffees, regardless of the country, those prices suffer also. All right?
Mm-hmm.
And so where family to family direct trade specifically benefits the relationship in the farm is that Miguel and I have agreed upon price for the coffees we purchase them. And it has nothing to do with the current price of coffee on the world market. It's a price based on where he can make money,
Mm-hmm.
and we also can get it at a cost that allows us to be profitable so that we can continue to do, I think, the good things that we do in our community, and at the same time give Miguel and his family enough money to be able to be profitable so that they can pay their workers above average wage and be able to do things like make sure their water's clean when it goes back into the system. And I think what you were hinting at is that if they are able to make enough money off the sale of their green coffee, that's ultimately what takes the pressure off the land, because they don't face the need to chop it down in the pursuit of profitability.
To cultivate every inch.
Yes.
They don't have to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. That's good. So the post that caught my eye on Facebook there
Yes.
was about a monkey.
Yes, the Columbian, the Columbian night monkey. There are about 10 species in Colombia, and several more prevalent in the Huila region. This is the first time that anybody has seen one on the property in the reserve. Now Miguel is, grew up on the farm and has been there, pretty much most of his life, and so he was really pleasantly surprised and excited to see that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because one of the things that, in addition to maintaining the reserve itself, is that Miguel has a commitment to take the existing farm that's planted in coffee and continue to add to the biodiversity of the fields. And so that includes citrus crops, that includes bananas and plantains, and they have a garden with onions and potatoes and things, so that the farm continues to move towards self-sufficiency. And the things also that the fruits and the other kinds of plants and trees that they're planting on the farm, they're beneficial not only for the farm and the workers, but for animals like
The night monkey.
the night monkey and a whole host of other animals that we do know. There is a small black bear native to the area. Now we know they're out there, but no one ever sees them. It's like here down in southern Ohio, West Virginia. They're a bear, but people live there all their lives and never seen them, and that's the same way. So we're just we hope to continue to just in a quiet manner see if in the course of time we can continue to try to increase our sightings of interesting wildlife and flowers and fauna and insects like the blue morpho and all these things that we're hopeful that will continue to benefit from the reserve.
That's great. So if people want to get a little more detail on what's going on down there, how can they do that?
Sure. They can go ahead and, if they would, visit the Grounds for Thought YouTube page and watch our documentary that we released in October of last year called The Road to El Carmelo. And it is indeed a 21-minute documentary filmed by local videographer Dustin Galish, and it's on our journeys from here in Bowling Green to the development and building of the relationship between our family farm in Columbia and the announcement of the Grounds for Thought Nature Reserve. And so it's a really fascinating look at what we've got going on in Columbia.
And I haven't seen it yet, but I'm going to take a guess. There's some awesome, lush, beautiful images in there.
Oh, it is. In 21 minutes, I think it's just the perfect length to be interesting, but not too much information for sure. But there's some beautiful views. Colombia as a country is incredibly beautiful. The people are fantastic. The food is wonderful. I can't recommend it enough for sure. And I think the documentary, in our own small way, tries to capture some of that.
Back to the...
Yes.
So, overall, globally, what is the impact, of the coffee industry, do you think?
Well, okay. it has its good points and it has its bad points.
Uh-huh.
Because what you have is in many of these producing countries, particularly in Central and South America and in coffee producing countries in Africa, that you do have small family farms that are trying to take care of their family and their backyard and their community and try to make it a better place. Most people worldwide are very family oriented and very community oriented and want to be respectful of the environment and be helpful if they can and try to make a living at the same time. And so you have that aspect of the coffee industry, which is beautiful. All right. But then at the same time, coffee is the second or third largest global commodity behind or right up there with oil and gold. Okay, so exploitation can occur, particularly in these countries that grow huge quantities of low quality, Robusta, strip farming, lots of chemicals that ultimately aren't good for the soil, the terroir itself, and the workers. Okay, so it's a double-edged sword. So I think where the specialty coffee industry has taken upon itself in the last 2 decades, particularly as the industry has grown to recognize where they are having an impact, good and bad, and how they can continue to try to enhance the aspects that they can make a positive impact on, and try to continue to negate some of the negative impacts that naturally occur with the processing and distribution of coffee.
So is most coffee grown by small farmers?
Particularly when it comes to specialty coffee, yes. All right, it's really most of the coffee is really grown. And what I mean is that I think the average farm in a lot of these producing countries is maybe a couple of acres. All right, think about like southern tobacco farmers back in the 40s. All right, 5 acres and a mule.
Right.
And bringing a few bags to market. All right, and often having to sell to the local market, who's basing their price on what they can get,
locally,
or on the world market, or on the regional market. So all these things. So that's where farms that have the direct trade relationships can make a difference.
So if you're somebody who loves coffee,
yes,
and you're also someone concerned about your ecological impact,
yes,
you're better off getting like the specialty coffee.
You certainly are.
Yeah. Okay.
Really, because, we want to talk. If you want to talk about traceability, I mean, let's use the Columbia El Carmelo as an example. We can easily show you that, hey, this farm in 100 years has never used any chemicals or any pesticides on their land. All right. And not only that, we can show you, hey, here's the actual mountain that your coffee is grown on. Here is the family that picks the beans. Here is how it's processed. Here's it coming into the port. Here it is in Bowling Green. And then, we've done, a lot of work over the last 3 decades here to show people what we're all about as a small company and a family and our commitment to community.
All right. That's just about all the time we've got. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I just thanks for having me in today to talk. And certainly, if you're going to drink good coffee, I'm a little bit biased, but give the Grounds for Thought coffee a try, particularly El Carmelo, because it is fantastic tasting coffee, but it does represent everything that is and can be good about specialty coffee.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Kelly.
Yeah, thank you, Joe.
Okay, that was our interview. Thanks for listening. And, one really nice aspect about this that I wanted to focus on was that this is a, person to person, small business to small business direct connection. And as our governments fail to take the big steps, fail to make the treaties necessary to protect the environment, these kinds of individual efforts become more and more important. And so, that's our interview. We're very grateful to Kelly to take the time out to talk to us. We know he's super busy running his coffee shop all the time, but now we are also grateful to our advertisers and patrons. So let's go ahead and hear that ad.
For a Green Future is also brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They also restore wildlife habitats and lead people on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. There are several ways to get a hold of them and find out what's happening. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. Another is to visit their website, www.wcparks.org. The website again is www.wcparks.org. They are also available on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and many others. Just search for WC Parks. That's the Wood County Park District, and we're very grateful for their support.
And we are also grateful to our patrons. And these are wonderful, nature-loving people who went to patreon.com. That's Patreon. There they searched for a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page, and they looked over our cool Patreon pictures on there and picked a level of membership that matched their budget every month. And so then every month a little bit comes out of their account, comes over to us, and that's how we could afford to keep this show on the air. So thank you so much to our patrons, and won't you join them? Okay, Rebecca, that brings us to your segment of the show, and we're going to hear from your uncle.
Yes, yeah. My uncle is a retired Unitarian minister who does guest spots, apparently, at local churches, apparently. And he wrote most of this in response to some evangelical friend of his who thinks that global warming isn't real, and if it is, God can destroy the earth anyway if they want to, and all this stuff. And then he talks about denial a lot. I can't read the whole thing, and just basically a lot of the natural disasters that we've been talking about, as proof of why he can't maintain the denial anymore. And then he says, what is my responsibility? What can I do? How can I change my daily life? I take steps to reduce my consumption of fossil fuels. I support conservation organizations. I vote for people who are addressing environmental problems. It all seems so inadequate. When I was a young man, my future seemed endless. It seemed that the earth and the human race might endure forever. I supported conservation organizations in hopes of preserving portions of the natural environment and the wild things that lived in it unchanged forever. Now I know better. Wild nature is not immune to change. Life is not forever. It says, I am in my 82nd year. In 2021, life expectancy for women was 79.3 years compared to 73.5 for men. My assignment is clear. It is to live with a full and fruitful life amidst the awareness of life's transiency while being fully aware of the temporal nature of my existence. It is to live without the kind of optimism that pretends that there are sure and certain answers to the Earth's problem. It is to live with hope, knowing that the outcome is threatening but uncertain. People all over the world are working to find solutions. Perhaps there is still a workable future for humanity on planet Earth. It is to face my fears without becoming one of those who misdirects useless anger against other people. Let me continue to support organizations working for environmental conservation, protecting species and habitats as best we can. Let me remain steadfastly engaged in the political process in support of those who are working towards mitigation of global warming. Let me be numbered among those who show compassion for climate refugees, people whose lives are uprooted by climate catastrophes, those who are displaced by melting permafrost, rising sea levels, extreme drought, heat, and famine. In spite of all, I hope to go on living a life of human dignity and decency. I need to be asking myself from day to day, how shall I live in these difficult times so that I still have my self-respect when I look in the mirror in the mornings? Whatever else I may lose, I want to save my self-respect. Let me remember that I live in the present, not the past, not in the future. Fear about the future can lead to paralysis. Life in the present must go on. I may live with grief. The losses are real. Sadness need not drive out joy. Today, my everyday activities are still meaningful. Today, I still love my family and friends. Today, the beauty of the world around me is still real. Here with you in this moment, I am lucky to be alive.
Oh, very nice. Nice. What is your uncle's full name, just to give him credit?
David J. Miller.
David J. Miller,
Yes.
nice. A wise old man from the sound of it, yeah.
He always do good sermons. I always liked his sermons.
Cool. All right, well, on to our ecological news segment, and in keeping with the tone of that sermon there from your uncle.
Uh-oh.
Well, no, we're going to have an optimistic
Okay,
first
efforts
story.
to fix it, yeah.
Yeah,
There
some
we go.
good news. There are people trying to change things. This comes from windeurope.org, and it's the title, they have an article titled Uptake, and I think they meant uptick, but it's an uptake in permitting and investments brings 2030 wind target within reach. And basically what's happened over in the European Union is they have streamlined their permitting process. And so it's getting easier and easier to put up wind farms. And the result in 2023 was 16.2 gigawatts of wind installed. And that 80% of that was onshore wind. And one gigawatt of that was also repowering, where you go back and you've got your old turbines, 20-year-old turbines, you replace one modern turbine can replace like 4 of those old, smaller turbines. That brings wind up to about 20% of the electricity in Europe, and solar is at about 10%, so they're up to about 30% renewables, true renewables. Now, electricity use increased from 412 gigawatt hours in 2022 to 466 gigawatt hours. So even as the demand increases, the percentage being supplied by wind and solar is increasing. And the upbeat thing in this report is that they predict that they're going to install on average from here until 2030 about 30 gigawatts a year. So they expect this rate to double starting next year. And as I said, the whole thing is based on EU rules making permitting easier. So also a really nice thing is that private investment in wind and solar has gone up from 400 million euros a year in 2022 to 30 billion euros in 2023. So the market has spoken and has chosen renewables as opposed to nuclear, which now nobody wants to invest in nuclear because too many people have just lost too much money over the decades in that risky endeavor. The biggest challenge, according to this report now, is grid connection. So they're on track to build enough generation. They just have to get the wires and poles in place to carry that power where it needs to go. And that goes into our slides into our next story. Australia, as we've often reported, is also making the switch. On March 1st in Renew Economy, there's a story titled Australia to seek 10 gigawatts of wind and solar this year, 2023, in their biggest ever tenders. And so the government is putting out bids, asking for bids to install wind and solar. They're looking for 10 gigawatts of wind and solar and 3 gigawatts of dispatchables, and that could be either batteries or pumped hydro or some other storage technology. Interestingly, the Conservatives in Australia have thrown all in, gone 100% on trying to stop it. They're just saying renewables are evil, give us more coal. And in fact, they want to keep coal going until nukes show up. They want to also build nuclear power plants.
Let's just stick with the coal until we can get something worse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yay.
That's the position of conservatives in Australia. But even they admit that even if they did that, even if they got control of the government, shut down all the renewables and just started working on nukes, the first one wouldn't come online until 2040. And, Australia would be well and truly cooked by that time. So it's interesting. But unfortunately, we have to temper this good news from Australia with a little bit of cautionary news. In one of the provinces of Australia, New South Wales, they have put in place new restrictions on visual pollution from wind turbines that actually, if they were applied to they just literally just opened the biggest wind farm in the world down there. But if these new rules had been in place, according to an organization called the SEC, the Smart Energy Council, they would have been unable to build that wind farm today, because the problem is that they're asking the companies to quantify the visual impact, not just for the existing houses, but for any hypothetical future houses. So if people just say, someday I might want to build something like right there next to the wind farm, that has to be factored in, and it's expensive. You got to do simulation studies, and it would have blocked. So let's hope.
And this is the only thing that people build that has any kind of aesthetic restrictions on it at all virtually.
Yeah, I have not heard of a single.
I've seen the ugly crap we're throwing up everywhere.
Yeah, I have not heard of an oil refinery anywhere in the world being stopped because people didn't like the way it looked.
Yeah,
So,
no.
Yeah. So, but still good news from Australia. They're still, this is a record tender. And so even though they might be stepping back a little in that one province, the rest of the provinces are all gung-ho and full speed ahead. So that's good news. So now, of course, we have to do our typical whipsaw here. Back to bad news. According to the Weather Network story, February 23rd, the Earth just experienced its hottest 12 months in recorded history. January was once again the hottest January ever. Sea surface temperature have been at record highs, meaning every single day a record high for 10 consecutive months. And so we are not doing well. And so the question, like your uncle said, we've got all these people working to try to fix the problem.
Right.
And we're making progress, folks. We really are. The question, though, is have we done enough? And the answer is no. And because that gets illustrated by our next story from Reuters on March 1st, carbon emissions hit record high in 2023.
Oopsie.
So global emissions increased by 1.1% from 2022 to 2023 to a new record of 37.4 billion metric tons of CO2 of global emissions. And part of the reason for this was there's so much drought going on in the world right now because of global warming that countries that depend on hydropower had to burn fossil fuels to make up the difference because their hydro dams aren't producing what they should.
Wow.
Yeah. So, in fact, of that 37.4 billion metric tons, 170 million of those tons are fossil fuels being burned to make up for the lack of hydro. The one kind of bright note, the growth was lower in 2023 than 2022. In 2022, global emissions increased by 1.3%, which is about 490 million metric tons. In 2023, it only increased by 1.1%, which is about 410 million metric tons. Again, not enough to save us, but at least the curve is starting to bend down. And the big offenders here, the big ones who caused this increase in 2023 were China and India. China's emissions increased 565 million metric tons. India's increased 190 million metric tons. So just those two countries, had they curbed theirs, globally we would have seen a large decrease. And 65% of the increase is from coal plants, and that means China, because China's building coal like crazy. But had we not had renewables in there, had we done all this increase with just fossil fuels, then we would have tripled the amount of carbon gases we put into the air. So holding it down to 1.1%, I guess, is something of an accomplishment. And in fact, the advanced economies, not counting China and India, our emissions have dropped. We're back down to 1973 levels of carbon emissions.
Cool.
So Europe, the EU, America, Australia, countries like that, who are considered, quote, advanced economies, unquote, we are, in fact, going in the right direction. So we just got to keep with it, folks. But we have to apply some pressure to China and India. People always make the argument, oh, you can't limit China because per capita, per person, they don't produce nearly as much as the US. Well, I'm sorry, but the globe, the atmosphere doesn't care about per capita. All it cares about is carbon in or carbon out. And so the more carbon you put in, the worse off we're all going to be. So yeah, we have to stop giving China and India a pass. Okay, let's see how much. Oh, we're racing along here. We're almost out of time. Gosh. All right, next story, microplastics. Been a lot of news stories lately in a lot of places. Basically, our bodies are getting filled up with microplastics. There have been a number of studies. Guardian had a story on February 2nd or February 27th. Microplastics found in every human placenta tested.
Boy.
They did a test of placentas, and there's all kinds of microplastics in there. The most common is polyethylene, which is what goes into bottles and plastic bags, plastic bottles and plastic bags. Next comes PVC, and then nylon. Microplastics have been found in literally every organ of the body: arteries, brains, breast milk. It's been directly linked to inflammatory bowel disease. And so if you're someone who suffers from that, you might want to consider going organic, because people who eat organic foods have measurably less of this microplastic in them. Microplastic is also an endocrine disruptor, and that could have long-term effects on things like sperm production. Okay, last story really quick. In The Guardian, March 2nd, the rainbow lorikeets are being paralyzed by something. Thousands of rainbow lorikeets, which is the most common bird in Australia, are just dropping out of the skies, unable to move. They can bring some of them back to health, but nobody knows what's causing it. So that's a mystery we'll hopefully solve soon. All right, that's about it for our show. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No